Welcome back to the deep dive. Today's topic is really hitting home for a lot of folks out there.
Yeah.
We're diving into something you've all been talking about a lot, the National Testing Agency in India, and all the huge controversies that have been surrounding their entrance exams. I mean, we're talking about NEET for medical school, JE for engineering, UGC net for university teaching positions, CUAT for undergrad studies.
Right.
Like these exams, they are the gatekeepers, for so many aspiring professionals in India.
Absolutely.
And it's clear from what you've all sent us that there have been some really serious, challenges that the NTA has been facing.
Yeah.
So in this deep dive, we're going to try to understand just what are those core issues that the NTA has been dealing with.
Yeah. You've given us a really comprehensive overview of all this. And it's clear that there are some recurring concerns.
Right.
So today we're going to be focusing on a few of those.
Okay.
We'll be looking at the impact of unclear exam questions. Also, this really contentious practice of charging fees to challenge answer keys. And then, of course, we have to talk about the persistent problem of cheating during these exams.
Right.
And perhaps even more concerning, the instances of paper leaks that have been happening.
Yeah, and to give you a sense of the scale we're dealing with here, just one of these NEET-UG paper leak investigations.
Right.
The CBI filed a 5,500-page charge sheet.
Wow.
5,500 pages just for one. And then there's the fact that students have to pay this non-refundable fee every time they dispute an answer on the key.
Right. Yeah.
Even if they end up being proven right.
Exactly.
So, okay, let's unpack this a bit. Where should we start?
Well, let's start with this whole issue of question ambiguity.
Okay.
How does that impact students,
Yeah.
When we talk about question ambiguity, what we're really talking about is exam questions that are just poorly worded or unclear in what they're asking.
Right.
Or sometimes they might even have multiple correct answers.
Yeah.
And that's a problem because imagine you're a student, you've been preparing so hard for this crucial exam, and then you get there and the questions are so difficult.
Right.
But the difficulty isn't even in the subject matter itself.
Yeah.
It's just in figuring out what the question is even asking.
It's like a trick question almost.
Almost, yeah. It's so frustrating for those students.
And we saw this play out in NEET-UG 2024.
Right.
Where there were all these allegations of ambiguous questions.
Yeah.
I mean, specific questions weren't really made public.
Yeah.
But the allegations were widespread enough that it even came up during the Supreme Court's review of the whole exam.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and, the court didn't end up ordering a retest or anything.
Okay.
But you can imagine how many students felt like they had been unfairly assessed.
Oh, absolutely.
Because of these potentially flawed questions.
Yeah. And what's really interesting is when we look across all these different exams, this isn't just a one-time thing.
Yeah.
This is a recurring problem.
Yeah.
Like, let's look at the JEE Main 2025 Session 1.
Okay.
They actually ended up dropping 12 questions from the final answer key.
12.
12, yeah.
Wow.
Because after students challenged them and expert reviewers went in and looked at them,
Okay.
they agreed that there were either ambiguities or straight-up errors.
Wow. So that really does point to like a systemic issue.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like unclear questions are a recurring problem across these huge national exams.
Right. And when we think about why this might be happening, our sources point to some different perspectives.
Okay.
A lot of the critics suggest that there's just a lack of rigor in the NTA's question setting process.
That makes sense.
Right. And there's been some speculation about whether they're outsourcing the work or if the vetting procedures are just not adequate.
Yeah. I mean, given how important these exams are to so many people's futures, you'd think that making sure every single question is absolutely perfect would be like their top priority.
Right. Like what processes are in place to catch these ambiguities? Because on the other hand, we have the NTA themselves, and they always say that they take sufficient care in preparing the questions.
Right. Sufficient care.
Yeah. That's a direct quote from their JEE Main 2025 answer key release.
Interesting.
So clearly there's this gap between what the agency is saying and then the reality of these ambiguous questions actually ending up in the exams.
Yeah. And, for the listener out there, think about it from the student's perspective. These exams are already so stressful.
Yeah.
So much pressure. And then to add on top of that, this extra layer of anxiety and unfairness because the questions themselves aren't clear.
Yeah.
It just makes it so much harder to actually evaluate students' understanding fairly.
It's true. It kind of defeats the whole purpose of the exam.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to another area that's been really controversial.
Okay.
This fee that students have to pay if they want to challenge an answer on the provisional key.
Right, so basically if a student thinks there's a mistake on the answer key,
Yeah.
they can challenge it,
Right.
but it's not as simple as just saying, hey, this is wrong.
Right.
They actually have to pay a fee for each question they want to challenge.
For each question.
For each question.
And is this standard across all the exams?
It seems to be, yeah.
Okay.
Like we see it for CSIR, UGC Net, December 2024,
Mm-hmm.
JEE, Maine 2025, NEET-UG 2025.
Okay.
They're all charging €200 per question.
Per question. So if a student thinks multiple answers are wrong,
Right.
that could really add up.
Oh, absolutely. And here's the thing that's causing so much controversy.
Okay.
That fee is not refundable,
Even if the student is right.
even if they're right.
Wow.
So even if their challenge is successful and the answer key gets changed,
Yeah.
they don't get their money back.
Wow. So your sources show that there's been a lot of pushback on this.
Yeah, students and educators are really upset about it.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's understandable. They see it as unfair and exploitative, especially because it creates this financial barrier
Right.
that could prevent students from less well-off backgrounds
Yeah.
from even trying to challenge these answers,
Yeah.
even if they think they're wrong.
Right.
And that just makes it harder for them to get a fair evaluation.
And, even on social media, people have been calling this a money-making tactic by the NTA.
Yeah, I saw that on X.
Right. It makes you wonder if the NTA is more focused on making money
Right.
than they are on accuracy.
Yeah. And the process itself is kind of frustrating, too.
Okay. How's the...
Well, students have to submit their objections online,
Okay.
and then experts review them.
Mm-hmm.
And if the experts agree with a challenge, then the answer key is updated.
Right.
But here's the problem. If a challenge is rejected,
Okay.
students don't get any feedback on why.
Oh, wow. So they're just left wondering
Exactly.
what went wrong.
Yeah, and that just leads to more distrust
Yeah.
because it feels like there's no transparency.
It really makes you think about the whole system, right? Like, is it really fair to charge students who are already under so much pressure a non-refundable fee to question an answer key when the key itself might be wrong?
It definitely raises some questions about fairness and accessibility.
For sure.
Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit and talk about another major problem,
Okay.
cheating.
Right. Cheating, it's a big one.
It's a huge problem because it really undermines the credibility of the whole exam.
Yeah.
And we saw this in NEET-UG 2024.
Okay.
There were 63 reported cases of cheating.
63.
63, yeah. Things like impersonation,
Okay.
where someone else takes the exam in the student's place.
Wow.
And even cases where the wrong question papers were distributed.
Seriously.
Yeah, it was a mess.
But the NEET-UG 2024 issues went even further,
Oh, yeah.
didn't they?
Way further.
Right. The CBI found this whole network of people involved in leaking the exam papers.
Mm-hmm.
And it all seemed to be coming from this Oasis school in Hazaribagh.
Right, and the CDI identified 144 candidates
140.
who allegedly had access to those leaked papers before the exam even started.
So this wasn't just a few isolated incidents. This was organized.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It was a huge operation, and that's why the CBI's charge sheet was 5,500 pages long.
Wow.
It was a massive investigation.
It's interesting, though, that the investigation didn't directly implicate any NTA officials.
Right.
So it seems like this particular leak involved outside groups, maybe working with staff at the test center.
Yeah, so it shows you that the vulnerabilities aren't just within the NTA itself.
Right.
It's the whole system.
The whole system is vulnerable, yeah.
Yeah, all the different people and places involved in running the exam.
And JE Maine 2021 had similar problems too, right?
Oh, yeah, they had their own share of issues.
Okay.
People were posting screenshots of the questions online during the exam.
So they were using their phones.
Yeah, which is obviously not allowed.
Right.
And there were also cases of impersonation, and they had to blacklist a bunch of test centers.
So it seems like these problems are pretty widespread across different exams.
Yeah.
So what can be done about it? What are people doing to try and stop this cheating?
Well, there are some potential solutions out there.
Okay.
Like in Uttar Pradesh, they've started using AI.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, there's like facial recognition and behavioral monitoring during the exams.
And how's that working out?
It seems to be pretty effective.
Okay.
They caught over 500 cases of cheating just in 2024.
Wow. So technology can really make a difference.
It definitely can.
Okay, but it sounds like the NTA has been a bit slower to adopt these technologies.
Yeah, they haven't really implemented these things on a large scale yet.
Okay, but the 2024 government panel did recommend some changes, right?
They did, yeah. They suggested moving towards computer adaptive testing
Okay.
and hybrid exam models, which could make cheating a lot harder.
Right, because those formats are inherently more secure.
Exactly.
But yeah, it doesn't seem like those recommendations have been fully implemented yet.
Not yet.
And, for all the students out there who are working so hard to learn and prepare for these exams, it must be so disheartening to realize that the system itself might not be fair,
It really makes you question whether these exams are actually measuring merit.
Yeah, it's a huge problem, and it really undermines the integrity of the entire evaluation process.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we need to talk about what's been probably the most damaging issue for the NTA.
Yeah.
Paper leaks.
Right. These paper leaks have really put the NTA under the microscope.
Yeah, especially in 2024. I mean, it's a huge breach of trust.
Yeah.
And it raises some serious questions about how they're keeping these exams secure.
Absolutely. And the NEET-UG 2024 leak is a perfect example.
Right. Remember that one we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
From that Oasis school in Hazarabad?
Mm-hmm.
An organized group got their hands on the question papers before the exam even started.
And that CBI charge sheet laid out exactly how they did it.
Yeah, all 5,500 pages of it.
And even though the NTA said it wasn't a systematic leak, and they did take action against some people, the damage was already done.
Right. The exam's integrity was compromised.
Yeah, for a lot of students.
Yeah.
And they didn't even cancel the exam nationwide. They just adjusted the scores for some of the students.
Yeah, over 1,500 of them.
But you can understand why a lot of people were upset that they didn't just redo the whole exam.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially the students who didn't have access to the leaked papers.
Right. It felt like it wasn't fair to them.
Yeah. And then there's this guy, Sanjeev Mukhia.
Oh, yeah.
They issued an arrest warrant for him. And he's been involved in exam scams before.
Yeah.
So it just shows you that these problems aren't going away anytime soon.
Yeah. It seems like there are these organized groups that are constantly trying to exploit these exams.
And 2024 wasn't just about NEET-U, right? There was the UGC-NET June 2024 exam too.
Yeah.
Which they actually canceled.
A day after the exam.
A day after.
Yeah. Crazy, right?
That's a huge decision to cancel a national exam after it's already happened.
Yeah, but they had intel that the paper had been leaked.
Okay.
It was on the dark net, and people were selling it on Telegram.
Wow.
Yeah, but then in January 2025, the CBI closed the case.
They closed it?
Yeah, they said they didn't have enough evidence of a breach.
So what does it mean?
I don't know. It's really confusing.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes you wonder if they were right to cancel the exam in the first place.
Yeah, and it definitely doesn't help with public confidence.
No.
In the NTA. And, looking back, there were other leaks too, like JG Maine 2021.
Right.
But the NEET-UG and UGC-NET leaks in 2024, those were huge.
They were.
And the public outrage was massive.
Yeah.
It even got the Supreme Court involved. And the NTA chief was removed in June 2024.
Yeah, I remember that.
So the government knew they had to do something.
Right.
They formed this high-level panel led by the former ISRO chief, K. Radhakrishnan, and they came up with all these proposals for strengthening the security around the exam materials.
Yeah, like using sealed containers and having CCTV cameras everywhere.
Right. They're really trying to tighten things up for the 2025 exams.
Yeah. Hopefully it'll make a difference.
And it's important to remember that these leaks don't just affect a few people. They impact everyone.
They do.
They undermine the whole idea of these exams being fair.
Exactly.
And merit-based.
Yeah, when the questions themselves are compromised.
Right.
It just throws the whole system into question.
Yeah, it's devastating for the students who are working so hard.
That's to succeed. Okay, so we've talked about all these specific issues, the ambiguous questions, the objection fees, the cheating, the paper leaks. But there are also some bigger systemic problems with the NTA.
Right, like what kind of thing?
Well, there have been a lot of logistical breakdowns.
Okay.
Like in CETDG 2022, there were all these technical glitches.
Oh, yeah, I remember hearing about that.
It was a mess, and it just made everything feel so chaotic.
Right, it makes people question if the NTA is even capable of running these exams smoothly.
Exactly, and then there's the fact that they rely so heavily on outsourced test centers.
Right, like using private schools for NEET.
Yeah.
To handle the huge number of students.
Right. It makes sense logistically.
Yeah.
But it also creates more security risks.
Right, because it's harder to control the standards at all these different centers.
Exactly.
But it sounds like they're changing that for NEET-UG 2025.
Yeah, starting in May, they're only going to use government colleges as test centers.
Interesting.
It's a big change.
Yeah.
And it seems like a direct response to all the security concerns.
Right. It gives them more control over the exam environment.
Exactly.
So it seems like the government is taking some steps to address these problems.
Yeah, the panel from 2024 suggested some major restructuring within the NTA.
Okay. What kind of restructuring?
Well, they want to create 10 new divisions.
10 new divisions.
Yeah, focusing on things like test security research and development and IT infrastructure.
So they're really trying to improve their capabilities.
Yeah, and they're also planning to move towards digital or hybrid exams over time,
Okay.
which could help with some of the security risks of paper-based exams.
Yeah, makes sense.
I think the government is realizing that the NTA needs to change how it's organized and how it does things
Yeah.
if they want to handle these massive national exams
Right.
and keep them secure.
And they're also going to stop doing recruitment exams from 2025
That's right.
so they can focus on entrance tests.
Yeah, streamline their work and really concentrate on what they're supposed to be doing.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of the NTA's problems, but we also need to acknowledge the public's reaction to all of this.
Yeah, I mean, people are angry
Right.
and frustrated.
And rightfully so.
Absolutely.
You know, even if we take unverified claims with a grain of salt, the sentiment on social media is clear.
Yeah, you can really see the lack of trust in the NTA.
Yeah, like that video from June 2024 that supposedly showed question papers and answer sheets just lying out in the open.
Yeah. Who knows if it was real?
Right.
But it shows how worried people are about the NTA's security.
Yeah, and it shows just how important public trust is for an agency like the NTA.
Absolutely.
I mean, they need the students and parents and educators to believe in them if they want to do their job properly.
Yeah, and all these controversies have really damaged that trust.
Yeah.
It's going to take a lot of work to rebuild it.
So to wrap up this deep dive into the NTA, it's clear they're facing some major challenges.
Yeah, multiple challenges.
We've got procedural weaknesses, security vulnerabilities, both internal and external. And they've got a huge task ahead of them, rebuilding public confidence in the fairness and integrity of their exams.
Exactly.
And they have taken some steps.
Yeah, like adjusting scores and blacklisting centers.
Right.
And they've got these plans for reforms in 2025.
Okay.
But the question is, will it be enough?
Yeah, are they really committed to making things right? I mean, there's still controversy over the objection fees. There's still the risk of cheating. And the paper leaks have left a lasting impact.
Yeah, people are skeptical.
Yeah, and rightfully so.
Yeah.
You know, it really feels like the success of these reforms is going to depend on how well the NTA actually implements them.
Absolutely.
And how transparent they are about the whole process.
Yeah, transparency is key.
Yeah, because trust isn't just given. It has to be earned.
Exactly.
And the NTA has a lot of work to do to earn back that trust. So for all of you listening, think about this. What do you think is the most important thing for restoring the credibility of India's national entrance exams? Is it better security, more transparency, greater accountability? Or maybe we need a whole new approach to high-stakes testing. It's a complex issue with a lot of different angles, so keep exploring, keep asking questions. And if this deep dive sparked your curiosity about any particular aspect, whether it's the NEET-UG investigation or the possibilities of digital exams, we encourage you to dig deeper. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.